Thank you. Good morning. My name is Howard, and I'm an alcoholic from Gilbert, Arizona. A lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't even care where Gilbert, Arizona is. You know where Scottsdale is? Gilbert's about $750,000 southeast of Scottsdale, out towards Apache Junction. Thank you for coming. I got a big crowd this morning. This is the meditation crowd usually isn't this big. I was honored to be asked to be here, and then the additional honor was asked to do this. What I'm going to do is I have about 75 minutes. I don't know how many people I hear it can last 75 minutes, but what I'm going to do is about maybe 30 minutes of talking and then lead a 30-minute meditation, a guided meditation. And I've got to stay awake and alert during the meditation. Sometimes when I'm doing that guided meditation, I get into the meditation, and then I just stand here. Sometimes you will get into it and go right to sleep. How many of you are regular meditators? By that, meditate every week. How many meditate every day? There we go. I think everybody finds their own way in AA into everything. We have the book and our sponsors and everything to guide us, but we each find our own way into our own program. I mentioned last night what I think is a scientific fact, but there's a book called Why God Won't Go Away. I can remember that name, and so it's written by a couple three neuro scientists, brain scientists, and they were trying to find out what part of the brains are most active during meditation. And there's what they call a SPECT machine, which they actually get traces of activity based on color when they get and they were working with Tibetan monks and Franciscan nuns, and when these people were reaching their consciousness of God, or one of the scientists said their climax on the meditation, they could take pictures of, and they had released radioactive stuff into the brain so that the color of the brain changed based on what was active. And meditation, and I think it's true of the rest of the steps. Each step changes our brain activity. It's like the fourth step. Now, if we are spring-loaded to being angry, and we have a whole lifetime full of people that we're angry with, and if we forgive them for whatever it was they did, because what they did doesn't exist anymore except in my head. This ability to forgive and know that God is actually doing the forgiving and guiding me through this, that's been my experience. You're stopping a lot of pumping of neurotransmitters to activate anger. That changes you. And it's marvelous, I think, that the 12 steps, and each one of them are in exactly the right sequence, in exactly the right increment to address our brain chemistry problems that they didn't even know about when they wrote the steps, and in detail addressed it. It's interesting. It's divine order, I think. But be that as it may, meditation. Now, we've all read the book. Meditation isn't that big a deal in the big book. They only ask you to do it when you're doing any step. All the steps require some prayer and meditation to do it. If you're not willing, ask God for willingness. And so prayer and meditation play a role in each of the steps. Except for that, they only want you to do it upon awakening and planning your day, when facing indecision, as you go through the day and are irritated and doubtful. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. About this matter of prayer, better men than us, or we, are doing it constantly. Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts that must go with us constantly. And then upon retiring. But except for that, prayer and meditation has very little role. And as we look at the steps, and just kind of look at them reasonably, in the first step we are really conceding to our innermost self that we lack the power to control the circumstances and events of life in such a way that we will wrestle satisfaction and happiness out of this world. We see that we've never been able to do that, and we lack the power. Then we come to believe that there is a power that we can trust, and then the third step is we trust that power to unfold in the proper way. And while we have to participate in the activities of life, we can't control them, so we learn to trust the goodness of the outcome, or look for the goodness of the outcome. And then in the fifth step, it says we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. In the seventh step, we surrender all of our lives, good and bad, to our Creator. In the ninth step, suddenly we find that God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And in the 10th step, we enter the world of the Spirit. We finally enter the world of the Spirit. Prayer and meditation are our principal means of being conscious of the presence of the Spirit. This isn't something that can really pay off very well with half measures. If we've done all of these other steps just to enter the world of the Spirit, then we would, as Frank and my sponsor told me, you don't want to just slough this off. Either that or do be a two-stepper, a first and a, just work the first and the 12th step if that's what you want to do. A lot of guys I haven't heard much about two-steppers lately. We used to hear about two-steppers, I think, more than they just work the first and the 12th step and the 13th. But who counts? Who counts? So there was a guy named Richard Alpert. I'm going to give you some recommendations on books. People say, do you have any books you recommend? There was a Richard Alpert. He was a PhD psychologist, the head of the Harvard psychology department. He had working for him a guy, Timothy Leary, Dr. Timothy Leary. And Timothy got involved in psychedelic drugs and believed he was having spiritual experiences from it, Dr. Albert tried it, and Dr. Albert supported Timothy Leary's efforts, but he had already written a paper that says LSD is not a good treatment because you can take exactly the same amounts and have completely different results from time to time. And some of us think that's good, and some of us thinks it's bad. But, you're looking at a paper cup and it just melts. Wow. Some people think that's good, some think it's bad. Dr. Albert thought it was bad, but the day before he got his paper published, they fired him and Timothy Leary from Harvard. And Dr. Albert went to India. He was from a very, very wealthy family. His dad was chairman of the board of a railroad. But anyway, he went to India, and he was running around with this guy, and he would start telling him about, well, when I was at Harvard, and this guy said, we don't care about you in Harvard, just be here now. And every time he would get excited about something, this guy would say, just be here now. And then this guy introduced Richard to his guru. And Richard had some private thoughts in the middle of the night, standing behind his car the night before, and this guru started talking to him about these private thoughts in detail. Well, Dr. Albert didn't know what to think of that, but he wanted to get to know more about this guy, so he stayed, and then he became a devotee, and the guy gave him the name Ram Dass. And Ram Dass wrote a series of books. He must have been a really good psychologist, and he really worked at the Eastern practices, so he was able to really describe how Eastern spiritual practices fit in our lives. He could describe the ego as a series of thoughts, just a matrix of thoughts and ideas that within ourselves describes who we are in our world, in every interaction, in every relationship. That's the ego. And it gives some people a sense of security. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, the ego isn't, but to the extent that you're afraid to go outside your ego, it becomes your prison. It becomes a thought prison. And meditation is a technique by which you can set yourself free from this thought prison and change it from your prison to your living room, so that you can come and go from the ego through meditation and other spiritual practices. There's another guy, I'll introduce him by saying, hello, Dalai. The Dalai Lama, and he has written a series of wonderful spiritual books, and one of them that I like the best is called An Open Heart. And it is a terrific book. It just sounds like I'm reading the program, except he doesn't know about the exact sequence things have to be in. But he has a pretty good sequence, and about a little over halfway through the book, he goes off a deep end. And I don't know what in the world he's even talking about. But I'm with him on that first half. And he talks about there's two kinds of meditation in his practice. And this fit me good, but we each find our own way. And Bill made that abundantly clear. I think I just make these numbers up. I do. At least, and then I qualify it by saying, well, I said at least. At least 14 times he encouraged us in the big book, in the first 164 pages, to seek the goodness in religion. Look for where religion is right. Look for where it works in your life. Don't be afraid. Don't be. Don't let religion upset you. But then on page 48 and 49, he says the prosaic steel girder is made up of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speeds and in accordance with precise law. Now, I read that for 8 years, and I don't think I ever read it that I didn't think, this guy doesn't know much about electrons. You know, yes, they do at some level whirl around each other, but a physicist would normally describe an electron whirling around a proton. Now, if you're reading the big book and you let that kind of stuff bother you, it can cause you a world of trouble. You know, if you see it says, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And then it says, watch out for alcohol. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. Now, if it bothers you that God has all power, yet alcohol has power, you got to watch those things because the book's full of that. And alcoholics, you know, I believe we are spring-loaded to and I have Francis that say, I'm afraid and I don't know what I'm afraid of. You know? Well, I know what you're afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's that biochemically your brain has triggered an alertness because you're spring-loaded to that. You're very easily, and you feel this state of low-grade alert, and then you look for something to justify feeling that way. That's the way our minds work. We're looking for the grizzly bear, and he ain't around anymore, but we're still looking for him because we feel him. Our brains are got to find something to be afraid of because we're afraid. And meditation can set you free from that. If not totally free, it can reduce that in your life. So, when I came to, I had never had any luck with religion or with prayer. I had a lot of luck with whiskey. So I just gradually disengaged from religion and engaged whiskey. It wasn't a conscious thing, but you can't be a good Methodist and drink a lot of whiskey. I mean, they just don't accept that. And so you disengage from being a Methodist, engage in being a whiskey drinker. And then you justify that. You find reasons why you don't want to be whatever religion. You know, they make you believe things that you can't prove. They force you. They can't do that, but you think they did. That you will yourself to assent that something is true without any hope in this lifetime of validating that. No hope in the world of validating the Immaculate Conception in this lifetime. Yet, if you don't will yourself to assent that that's true, you're going to hell for that. Well, I believe it. I don't really, but I'm going to say I do, and I hope God's listening, because I really do. You know, I mean, you've heard that before, but this time I mean it. And I just pulled away from that in favor of whiskey, and I pulled away from that in favor of whiskey, and pulled away from prayer or any of that kind of stuff. and except you don't really do it. You know, you still have it. It's a baby elephant belief, and you don't even know you have it. So, but one of the things I found in my very first meeting, the first half was on alcoholism and what's an alcoholic, and the second half was on how do you stop drinking, and in the second half it was about God, and they read from the big book on page 93 to emphasize to your protege that whatever concept of God he has will work for him, provided it makes sense to him. Now that struck me on my first night. Provided it makes sense to me. And things that made sense to me, I started taking home and trying, and just the way it worked for me. And but I wasn't going to pray. And I wasn't going to I didn't tell anybody I didn't pray until I had about a year. And then I'd get in your face to tell you, well, I don't pray. God does not have ears. My God created the universe, which is an endless series of very finely tuned processes and parameters. Very, very close tolerance where he does not need input from me. What the hell am I going to say to him? You know, I'm going to say, don't let it rain tomorrow. I know that don't work. And you know, the only prayer that works is if you want it to rain, let it rain. And if you don't. But that turns out not to be an altogether bad prayer. So anyway, I didn't pray, and nobody cared. I would get you aside, and I'd say, well, I don't pray. I wanted you to know, because you said in the meeting about how you prayed. Now, I'll just tell you how well I was supported. During this phase, Kenny had moved out of town, and I got a new sponsor named George Cooper. And I was glad to tell George was an actor, made a living acting. And I'd be talking to George in my head, I'd be saying, why did I ask this actor to be my sponsor? I should have a scientist or a senator, maybe the president, but not an actor. And but I told him I didn't pray. And he was a Catholic. He prayed a lot. And and he believed in the Immaculate Conception, although turns out he didn't know who got pregnant and who was conceived in the Immaculate Conception. He thought that Mary got pregnant and Jesus was conceived. That's not the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception is Mary was conceived and St. Anne got pregnant. And the edict from the Pope was that Mary was blessed from the very beginning, and she was born free of all stain of the original sin. That was the edict that declared anyway, George, my good Catholic, did not know that. Don't make any difference. He still believed it. Even though I didn't know what it was he believed, yes, I do. So George told Fred Ellis, and Fred Ellis, the sponsor, was a guy named Jack Bailey. Some of you older people will remember Jack Bailey. Some of you may have heard him talk. He was a very active, very wonderful AA guy. And I didn't know that, I didn't understand this at the time, but I had told George, and then we were at a party, and I was sitting with Jack Bailey, who was the MC on a radio show called Queen for a Day. And he was an MC on a TV show, Queen for a Day. And Fred Ellis said to him, Jack, how's how's Larry doing? And Jack said, you know, I think Larry's going to stay sober. He said, Saturday night, when my head hit the pillow, I hadn't prayed for Larry. And I thought, well, I'm not. And then he said, no. And he said, I got up and got on my knees the side of the bed, and I prayed for Larry. Now, I'm impressed with that, you see. Now, he didn't tell me I should pray, but their little deal was that I should know that they pray, and that why they pray, and that's a strengthening thing. You know, that lifts the newcomer up. That's a good thing. Something that I don't remember to do nearly often enough. Now, I don't know when. How much time do I have left? $60? So, people are telling me in different ways I should pray, but when I told Frank I didn't pray, he said, well, I never learned to pray effectively until I learned to meditate. And I told the story last night, but he said, now, the big book tells us a lot about when to meditate and when to pray. But it doesn't give us very much detail on how to pray or meditate. If you look in Pass It On, it's a great book, I think. Read Pass It On page 352 to 354. They describe what motivated Bill to write the essays on the steps for the 12 and 12. And they say Bill had 15 years to watch people come into the program, work the steps from the big book, stay sober, but many of them remain angry, anxious, depressed, and filled with dread about their life, long after the high tide of active alcoholism has receded. And Bill wrote the 12 and 12 and the essays on the 12 steps. He said in a memo that he wrote to Father Dowling, to deepen and broaden the experience of the old-timer and the newcomer alike on their experience with the steps. And when I first read that, I thought, well, hell, he didn't do that. It was 1984 when that book came out, so I had at least 12 years when I read that, and I said, well, he didn't do that. That isn't. And then Frank, who had died years before, who still talked to me, said, contempt prior to investigation. And so I started reading it until I didn't run into an instance in the 12 and 12 until the second sentence of the first step. None of us want to admit that we are personally powerless. And then in the third paragraph, our admissions of our personal powerlessness become firm bedrock upon which we can build happy, productive life. Well, that's all right, but I'm not personally powerless. But back then, I meditated whenever I was agitated or doubtful, and I was doubtful about Bill doing this in the big book and about my personal powerlessness. So I meditated in the evening, just be conscious of what my doubtfulness is, and then just be open to any ideas that come to me. And I can tell you that it's a longer thing than this, but when my timer went off, I had reached a place where I could just nearly admit that I'm powerless, but the timer went off, and then my head said, but I'm not powerless. I have the personal power to decide to pick up this big book, which was in my lap and which was open to page 45, where it said lack of power is my dilemma. It doesn't say powerlessness is my dilemma. I just lack power. But in the 12 and 12, it's powerlessness. I have the personal power to decide to pick this book up. Having decided, I can pick it up. I have personal power. Then the thought came to me, okay, now pick it up with your vision. Don't touch it with your hands. Just wrap your vision around it and levitate. Well, I can't do that. It's silly. I can't do that. Well, give yourself that power. That's silly too. I can't give myself that power. And then, no, and you didn't give yourself the power to pick it up, and you didn't give yourself the power to decide to pick it up. You are personally powerless. Whatever power you have had to come from some other source of power. And I could stand on that bedrock and then look in the second step for an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence underlying the material world and life as we see it. But that was, and then all the way through the 12 and 12, there is that kind of deepening and broadening the 12 steps. You know, we don't have a lot in the big book about step 6 or 8, and boy, I'll tell you, he made up for that in the 12 and 12. He'll run you through a ringer looking for stuff. So anyway, he did a beautiful job, I think, in giving us a way to meditate in step 11 of the 12 and 12. And when I read that, of course, I saw the St. Francis of Assisi prayer, and that's all I saw. And Frank said, is that all you got out of that? And I said, that's all there is in it, Frank. And he said, well, come over tomorrow and let's go over it. And we went over it word by word, as only an old-timer can do, and ask you questions about each word. And you can see this is a losing battle. You just as well, you know, you've got your mind locked on the wrong thing here. And it says prayer and meditation are our principal means of being conscious of God. And then a couple pages later it says self-examination, prayer, and meditation are very helpful in our lives when we take them by themselves. But when they are logically interrelated and interwoven, they form an unshakable foundation for life. And he said, do you feel like you have you feel like your foundation for life is unshakable? Well, no, I don't. Well, let's try this. And you see, that's the thing. Frank or nobody else in AA that I pay attention to has ever asked me to do something that they don't say, let's try it. I will say, okay, we'll do it, and we'll validate it. And if it don't work, set it aside. That's what the Dalai Lama said. Two kinds of meditation. One, he says, is analytical meditation, where you look at your spiritual practice as an engineer would. You analyze the spiritual practice. And if you validate it in your analysis, then it is very solid in your spiritual program. But if it isn't, don't throw it away. Just set it aside. And as you build a stronger foundation of stuff that does make sense to you, then you'll find that these pieces fit in. In the meditation we're going to go through, the first three steps. We're going to do a guided meditation through the first three steps. And in the third step, that's the prayer. And we're going to go through the prayer. And we're going to go through, the language of the prayer. I offer myself to thee. Fulfill with me and do with me as thy will. Then we stop and are conscious of the truth that everything in life we need to fulfill our purpose is drawn into our life, and we are given the power and the knowledge to interact with it effectively with kindness, tolerance, and love, and to be conscious of our life's unfolding goodness and our love of God. Now, I was telling this to one of my Christian sponsees, and he said, "Oh, you took that from Romans 8:28." And I said, "I did not take that from Romans. It's just part of what makes sense to me about God being present in our life." He said, "Look it up." And you look it up, and it says, "We know that all things open to the good for those who love God and are called to his purpose," which is essentially the same thing. Now that's kind of interesting that I've kind of come in. Now I look, I'm looking in the Bible for good stuff, for stuff that, and it's, that I had, the 1 Corinthians 13th chapter. That has changed my life. Although I didn't go to the 1 Corinthians 13th chapter, I went to a book that Dr. Bob recommends. Dr. Bob recommends that we read The Greatest Thing in the World by Henry Drummond. That's a series of essays on 1 Corinthians 13th chapter, just like Emmett Fox's series of essays on the Lord's Prayer and on the Sermon on the Mount. Dr. Bob encouraged everybody to analyze those, and it's a life. For me, it changed my life. I could never make the 10th step work. Years and years of trying to follow the direction of the big book as I read it, of when fear pops up or when anger pops up, immediately stop and ask God to take it away. I did not do that one time. Never once. When I start to get angry, I'm angry, and then I'll go through the rest of the stuff. I'm sorry I did that. I'm going to try not to do it again. People, particularly your wife, gets sick of that. You just, you finally just quit. But you kept trying. Well, if you memorize 1 Corinthians 13th chapter, which I did, and you go over that, being conscious of the meaning of each word and phrase, which we open to that, which is kind of like listening, although you're not, but it's so that the meaning of the thing comes to you, and you've read Drummond, then you know that if you love your life, you will be patient. Why not wait? Because if you love your life, it's just good the way it is. That's the reason you love it. You'll be kind. You'll be generous. You won't envy what anybody else has because you love what you have. You'll be humble. Love is not puffed up and did not behave itself unseemly. If you love your life, you cannot behave yourself unseemly. And you're unselfish. Why are you unselfish? Because if you love your life, you know that there's no goodness in getting. There is only goodness in giving. There's no goodness in getting. There's only goodness in giving. That's where the good is. And you're of good temper. Love, if you love your life, And temper, anger, Drummond says, is the bubbling to the surface of something rotten underneath. and God, that fits me, you know. And is guileless, does not take advantage of other people's mistakes. If you live your life, you won't take advantage of other people's mistakes. And sincerity. If you love your life, what you will find is life is a lot better in truth than what you expected it to be. And now I meditated on that for 30 minutes a day for 6 months. And I got at the end where I could get all the way through it and love my life. And today I'm going to practice tolerance, or I'm going to practice patience. And then tomorrow I'm going to practice patience and kindness. And then the next day, patience, kindness, generosity. And it's amazing how you become a different person. So that when anger starts popping up, you can turn to loving your life because you practiced loving your life. You started your day loving your life. And it isn't just that. I went through a breathing thing where you just watch your breath, you're aware of your breath. How many of you have done that just for breath? You ever wonder, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Well, you can make up stuff. But in a practical matter, I found I'm driving the car, and it's my wife's car, and she's got things that she figures out all by herself. Certainly don't listen to me. And I pull over on the freeway off this road, parallel road, and I'm running it up to the speed limit. Now the RPM is up because I have it in third gear instead of overdrive. You're tearing up my transmission. I had a brilliant answer to that. Why don't you just shut up? Take me home. I'm never going to ride with you again. And we go through this, and my mind goes through this litany of stuff. Pat, you don't even know how I make a living. I'm a manager of the systems engineering department. I've got guys that design transmissions. I don't know anything about them myself, but I know that they don't design transmissions that tear themselves up because they're in third gear. I know that. Now, when I realize my mind is doing that, just like when you're watching your breath and you realize your mind has gone to something else, then you disengage from the something else. You accept that that's what your mind does. Then you disengage from that and re-engage your breath. When I realized my mind was going through this litany of BS about Pat, I disengaged from that. And there's a love song that describes my love for her when we were going through high school. It's been, a lot of guys have recorded the song, and it's called But You Don't Know Me. And the lyrics are, you gave your hand to me and you said hello. And my mind goes through these lyrics, listening for the deeper meaning of each word and phrase. You gave your hand to me and you said hello, and I could hardly speak. My heart was beating so. And anyone could tell you think you know me well, but you don't know me. No, you don't know the one who dreams of you each night and longs to kiss your lips and longs to hold you tight. To you, I'm just a friend. That's all I've ever been. But you don't know me. For I never knew the art of making love, though my heart aches with love for you. Afraid and shy, I let my chance go by, the chance that you might love me too. You gave your hand to me and you said goodbye. I watched you walk away beside that lucky guy. you see, and I had done that. But they broke up and I got right there. And I told her I loved her with all my heart. And my life was empty without her. And she married me. And she's the mother of 3 of the most wonderful kids with the best mother there is in the world. And I'm in love with her, and she's in love with me. And I will tell you, it is absolutely no importance to me any longer what her opinion is of a transmission in a Honda Accord. This discipline that we can get from these steps is transforming. That's why we do it. But my experience is they have transformed me. We never talked about this in the tattletale. And we never talked about meditation. Oh, I might be drunk and quote you some Shakespeare, but that was the only educational stuff we had. So when you started meditating, our mind would wander. And I said to George Cooper, to John Haley, my mind's too active to focus on meditation. He said, that's probably true, but you could sit there. Just sit there. Pick a length of time to meditate and just sit there. You can do that. Well, if you do that for just a little bit, there's going to be somebody inside of you say, well, he's going to just sit there. We might as well meditate. It'll happen, I guarantee you. And then you'll start having it. You'll start to itch. And now, though, you can scratch, but don't. Just meditate deeper. Just focus your mind more on your meditation than you do the itch. And the itch goes away, and you meditate deeper. Same thing with the little aches and pains. And then it gets you. Sleep. Oh my, you cannot stay awake. The answer to that for me was I learned to sit with my legs crossed in a yoga position, and sleep is so far away because of the pain in your hips. That's why they do that, I'm sure. That keeps you awake. And you already know how to meditate through pain. You've learned that early in the meditation. So you're wide awake with pain, and then you meditate deeper. And I went through 30 minutes at least of meditation every day for 6 months, and then I would change the meditation. And on the 1st of October, I would start a new meditation, and then the 1st of April, I would. And it just was a good thing to do. Frank taught me to meditate from on the steps from the 12 and 12. Could I have one more reading on the time? How many? 20? Okay. We're going to meditate for 20 minutes. Please sit erect. Be conscious of your breath coming in, breath going out. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 1, part 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control their drinking. The loss of control is characterized by an insane, obsessive belief each time they start to drink that somehow, some way, this time it's going to be different. This time they're going to control and enjoy the drinking. But coupled with that insane obsession is a physical reaction to alcohol that manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving for more once they start to drink, a craving much stronger than their willpower not to drink. They go through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolve never to do that again. Then they do it again and again and again, over and over and over. Any considerable period of time their life gets worse, it never gets better, which leads in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. If you have been able to be conscious of that description of the alcoholic and alcoholism, and if you know that that description fits your experience with alcohol, then you fully concede to your innermost self that you're an alcoholic. Fully conceding that I am an alcoholic, I also fully concede that if I drink or use again, my life will almost immediately return to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Knowing that, we look at step 1, part 2. We admitted that our lives had become unmanageable. After we have fully conceded to our innermost selves that we are alcoholic, the book tells us that alcohol is but a symptom of our problem. That selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem. And then it is explained that selfishness and self-centeredness in the program means that we have become like actors who have to run the whole show. Set the lights, choreograph the dance, write the dialogue for all the players, God help them if they say something I don't like, and direct their actions. For the purpose that if they would just do what we want, they would be happy. We would be happy. Everything would be wonderful. But for any number of reasons, it never turns out. The play never comes out. We redouble our efforts to make it happen. We get angry and self-pitying. And the big book says, asks us, what is our basic trouble? And then it answers with another question. Is he not the victim of the delusion, an insane delusion, that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? We could stop now and be conscious of our most recent problem, the most recent difficulty we had within a relationship or a circumstance. And we can see that the problem was we were not having our way. We lack the power to make that work. So we fully concede to our innermost selves that we lack the power to manage our lives so that we will have a sense of ease and comfort and well-being. Part 3 of the first step come from the 12 and 12, our admissions of our personal powerlessness become firm bedrock upon which we can build happy, productive lives. While we apparently have personal power, thinking about it more deeply, we can conclude we did not give ourselves that power. Therefore, it is not our personal power. That power has to come from some other source of power. And on that firm bedrock, let's look at step 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, set us free from the insane obsession to drink or the insane delusion that we can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if we only manage well. In the big book, Bill tells us that none of us will ever be able to fully define or comprehend this power which is God, but that we should be open to the possible existence of a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, having all powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, and manifesting precise law, order, harmony, and goodness in every aspect of all being. Be conscious of your breath coming in, going out. On your next in-breath, be conscious that as the air comes in, your lungs filter the oxygen into your bloodstream, where 4 molecules of oxygen bond to 4 iron molecules in the hemoglobin in your blood, holding it together until it's pumped out to teeny capillary veins, where oxidation takes place and the oxygen is converted to carbon dioxide and nutrients are released from the hemoglobin into the capillary veins out their walls to give every cell in your body new life. And you exhale carbon dioxide into the air. Plants absorb the air, process the carbon dioxide through its system to give all of its cells nutrients for new life, to convert the carbon dioxide back into oxygen and release it into the air. For our next breath, providing 21% of the oxygen, it's just the right amount to sustain plant life and animal life. Just one of an endless series of finely tuned parameters and processes where life gives life to life in divine order. And that is happening with each in-breath. So know as a mantra with each in-breath, the power of God is within me. And on your out-breath, the grace of God surrounds me. Know that that is truth. With each breath, we experience the power of God within me, and the grace of God surround me. The fact that with the help of the Hubble telescope, we can see light coming from galaxies 13 billion light years away. Light left that galaxy 13 billion years ago, yet your vision, less than 100-year-old vision, is principally interactive with exactly the same laws and harmony and order that was in the light when it was transmitted. Strong argument for the pervasive presence of a spirit underlying the totality of things, manifesting precise law, order, harmony, and goodness. Then Bill points out what he calls a perfectly logical assumption. If that divine order is underlying the material world, then it's a perfectly logical assumption that it's underlying life as we see it. Not just the chemistry of life, or the biology of life, or the physics of life, but life as we see it includes the circumstances and events of life, includes the character and the quality of the circumstances and events of life. The power of God is within me. The grace of God surrounds me. Not just in the immediate area, but clear on out through the universe. And I am a part of and not apart from. If someone coughs and I hear it, it is not a disturbance, it's a validation of our connectedness. The power of God is within me. The grace of God surrounds me. And after enough examination and consideration and thought, in the Old Testament it says, the law is love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength. In the New Testament, Jesus said, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Be conscious in your mind of the pervasive presence and power underlying the totality of things, unfolding the proper outcome of every circumstance and event. Being convinced, we are at step 3, where with the third step prayer, we commit ourselves to trusting that power which is God. And we address that power as God. And then we stop and we are conscious that who we're addressing is the spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, which has all powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, and which manifests order, harmony, and unfolding goodness in every aspect of all being. I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thy will. Now let's know that everything in life we need to fulfill our purpose in life is drawn into our lives, and we have been given the power and the knowledge to interact with those circumstances and events, and to practice patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, and to be conscious of our life's unfolding goodness. Being convinced of that and trusting that relieves me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Now let's stop and know that God does not experience problems, difficulties, or unresolved circumstances. Those are products of my thinking, my actions, my efforts to control things that I lack the power to control. God only experiences order, harmony, and unfolding goodness. And if I know that and trust that, that takes away my difficulties. That victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love. And we should stop and love our lives, our wives, our children, our program, and God. May I do thy will always. And what would be God's way of doing things? Well, we know that God graced his creation and his creatures with his Spirit for their goodness. So our way of life is at its best when we are a service to God's creation and his creatures for their goodness. May I do thy will always. The power of God is within me. Know that is truth. The grace of God surrounds me. Trust that as truth. Then we can settle into a consciousness of that presence. And when that consciousness diminishes, we can bring it back with that mantra. The power of God is within me. The grace of God surrounds me. And so it is. Thank you. That's true 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, moment to moment. We're always in the pervasive presence and power of God's unfolding goodness. Thank you for letting me share.